Today I was going to start off with French Tarrasch and then move on to the 5 games from there. So I wanted to just jump right into it and get into this theory. The French Tarrasch is defined by one e4, e6, d4, d5, knight d2. This is different than the mainline French, which is knight to c3. With knight to d2, it's kind of a more passive opening. Basically, it'll place pressure on d5 and defend e4. This is the main line. But here, really, you're just sort of putting pressure on, e4 in case black takes it. If black takes e4, it'll transpose into the mainline French where black takes e4. But overall, I mean, it has some small kind of positional differences that differentiate it from the knight to c3. Playing into its line, so d takes e4, knight takes e4, obviously leads to the same transposition. Knight f6, e5. Hey, good morning, Aphelion. Welcome to the stream. How are you? Yeah, so e5, knight f d7, bishop d3, c5, c3. And basically, this is sort of transposed into a normal French. The placement of the knight is different on d2 than c3. But it's helpful that it basically, allows c3 to be played. Oh, no problem, Aphelion. I mean, I always appreciate you guys being here and being here for the stream. But yeah, never worry about stuff like that. I'm always fine. Knight d2, c3, knight c6, knight e2, c takes d4, c takes d4. And here, basically, white has this pawn structure with the c5 pawn having traded off for the c3 pawn. We've gone over it a bunch of times, but as ideas behind the chess opening by Fine talks about, whether or not white can maintain this d4 e5 structure is really the important thing in determining how well French opening went. With knight d2, there's efficiency in that after e5, knight e7, c3 can be comfortably played without knight d2 or without the knight on c3. Normally in the French, there can be kind of maneuverings where the knight plays to b5 and then plays c3. But overall, this ends up being pretty strong for white. Knight c6, knight e2, c takes d4, c takes d4, f6, e takes, knight takes. And here, basically, white has a pretty good position. This is interesting. I don't know if knight f3 is probably the move here, but basically this opening ends up being pretty generally interesting. It's basically the main purpose, since the knight doesn't really have that much purpose on c3 other than to retake on e4, is to be able to play c3. Knight takes e4 and then c3 coming next move. Bishop d7, knight f3, bishop c6, bishop d3, knight d7, castles. And basically here, white is looking pretty, I guess I would say white's looking pretty solid. This d4 faces off favorably against this e6 pawn, and it's, overall pretty strong for white. Let's keep going. Knight g3, bishop e7, rook e1, castles, c3, rook e8, bishop f4. And pressure is being exerted by the bishop on the c7 pawn, but there's not really any there's not really any big French center here. This still works out well for white. I'm sure that the analysis is favorable to white, but there's no real pressure being exerted by e5. The knight is comfortably developed on f6, and e5 isn't defending that square. Anyways. E4, e6, d4, d5, knight d2, knight takes, and here basically, nothing too exciting. The knight is on e4. This could have come out of this could have come out of 3 knight c3 or 3 knight d2, and ideas like c3 and bishop f4 are here. Options here: castles, gn f6, knight g3, bishop e7, rook e1. And here, basically, it's a good position for white. It's just better development, straightforward. And unlike, the normal French, where, these pawns will get neutralized, but the d5's e6 structure will be maintained, this structure basically is solid for white. Trading the e pawn for the d pawn is not terrible. And that's consistent with what happens in the French exchange. Except in this particular case, the French structure is better for white. In the French exchange, the e6 pawn ends up on d5 and creates symmetry. Here, white just has a better centralized pawn. The main point of the French is not to basically not to trade off the D pawn or the E pawn for the D4 or E5 pawns, but to play moves like F6 and C5 so that the pawns are undermined in that way. Anyways, continuing on with this, we can look at other lines out of knight d2. C5 is a pretty aggressive response, but again, comfortably c3 can be played. Here, e takes d5 is the most common, basically transposing it into a French exchange position. Or if the queen takes, then it's not a French exchange. But here it is a French exchange. With a c3 here, it'll become that full French exchange structure with symmetrical pawns on d4 and d5. Knight gf3, knight c6, bishop b5, bishop d6, d takes, pawn takes. Yeah, this is the Tarrasch French. We just wanted to go through, I just wanted to get into the Tarrasch French before going into the full, I just want to go into the Tarrasch French before we go into the 5-game review. This is it's interesting. It's new theory for me mostly. I've always played the mainline French, but it has some positional things that are different. Specifically in positions where e takes d5 isn't the move that's played, or d takes e4 isn't the move that's played. It has unique things that are characteristics of the French exchange, as opposed to the regular French. Here, something like c5, e takes d5. Going through the options here. D takes e4 is the transpositional move. Other moves for black here are knight f6, c5, bishop e7, or knight to c6. Of these, I would avoid knight to c6. That gets into the normal issue with the French, where the c-pawn's getting blocked in by the knight. Instead, I would basically play something along the lines of knight f6, e5, knight fd7, bishop d3. And here, you basically have the bishop focused on the king side, and the c5 pawn exerts pressure on the d4 pawn, trying to disrupt the structure. But the key difference being c3 provides defense on this d4 pawn. So the normal undermining move c5, and pawn takes, basically pawn takes d4 prior to when a pawn can take back on d4. Isn't playable in this Tarrasch position. Basically, this trades into an opening that's relatively equal, and I think things are pretty much good here. Knight e2, c takes d4, c takes d4, and basically, white's looking like he's in pretty good shape here. Black's lost one of his key resources in terms of being able to play c5 to undermine the d4 square, and even though this center is relatively constricted for white, this still provides a favorable analysis, a better eval. Basically, it's a small, secure advantage. This is a much less volatile French. White has much less much less in potential to gain here. But overall, as a French position, this is a good general opening. Knight f6, e5, knight fd7, c3. This structure is pretty easy to maintain. You've constricted kind of the opening. You basically have development closer to the king and not as far out for white. But overall, this pawn structure, which I consider to be probably the most important thing in the French, in the French opening, can be maintained. So overall, there, I guess I would say, it's a pretty conservative way to play it. It generally doesn't lead to many, aggressive black wins, but you gain a small positional advantage, and you're able to hold the d4, e5 pawns easier. So in the middle game, basically, you will have slightly better chances, but not much better chances, and without much volatility, as is consistent with it doesn't contain the volatility that normally happens with the mainline French. Here, this is a situation in which white center gets liquidated. I think that black basically has the better center here, but I guess in terms of threats on potential backward pawn e6, knight b3. It's sort of, and castling. I guess pressure can be put on this e6 pawn that makes it compensating for issues in terms of white's pawn structure. You know, potentially development to bishop f4. That's not usually possible in the French exchange. And yeah, yeah. So let's take a look. Let's look at this. Yeah, no. I mean, French. You know, French is a tough opening. Knight d2, I think, though, is a much more conservative way to play it. If you want to steer out of the theory-heavy French games, playing the knight d2 thing is basically important. Playing knight d2, you know, is a way that you can play the opening more conservatively, and basically be fine. I think moves like c3, you know, are really what kind of support this this general opening. And trading the e pawn for the d pawn is not a bad trade for white. Yeah, no problem, Leaf. Thank you very much for stopping by, at least. So yeah, don't worry about it. Knight d7 is an idea. Bishop d3 is also an idea. And basically, I think white will be in a pretty good place. E4, e6, d4, d5, knight d2. Going over the main lines, I guess I'd probably want to play out one of each. Knight f6, c5, bishop e7. We've gone over a knight f6 line and an e7 line. Let's take a look at bishop e7. Here, white can just sort of do normal developing moves. He's not very ambitious in the sense that, you know, basically that the opening is going to be, you know, the opening is a key part of this game. And you know, the pieces aren't going to be, you know, supporting the further, more advanced squares in the center. Like d5 is basically not getting attacked by anything by the white pawn here. It ends up being, you know, controlled favorably by the e4 or by the e6 pawn relative to the e4 pawn. Black's control over d5 is better relative to the normal French, but in response, white gets c3, and basically everything's fine. Okay, knight f6, e5, knight fd7, bishop d3. And basically here, I think white has a better, you know, white has the better side of this. Hey, thank you very much for the follow, Matt Yop. Thank you. But yeah, so basically here, you know, c3, bishop b1, queen c2, you know, is a potential attack. But you know, this is an easier center to support with, you know, with c3. The undermining move c5 is made a lot less useful than it sometimes is. Anyways. Here, I guess I would just generally say, like, you know, white is trading his like a forward development. Knight c3 is a much more ambitious move, offers more probably better winning chances for white. You know, many times in the French, knight b5 is played. That's not an option that's available here. But this French Tarrasch will basically, you know, involve having a, you know, a good, well-supported, you know, a good, well-supported, relatively conservative center for white. You know, it's not a big spatial disadvantage because this d4, e5 pawn holds up well. But you know, this center advantage, you know, or the developmental advantage for white is less advanced than it is in the normal French. It doesn't show up as a spatial problem, but overall this is a more conservative placement of pieces. These pieces aren't nearly as advanced, and overall, you know, white doesn't have the same ability to press black, but it leads to a solid small positional lead. So if that's what you're going for out of the French, this can be a less theory-heavy way to do it. You know, on pawn takes e4, it transposes into knight takes e4 mainline French anyways, so you have to be ready to play that as well. But overall, knight to d2 is less restrictive for the c pawn, more restrictive for the dark squared bishop, and overall leads to a solid but more conservative position for white than in the normal French. I think in terms of themes, that's the main point. c5, e takes d5, queen takes, knight gf3, c takes, bishop c4, and eventually this d4 pawn is going to fall and white will equalize materially, and then basically white will have a queenside majority, basically having this c pawn in exchange for this black e pawn. But you know, overall it's less pressing for white against black, but a solid idea in case you're interested in taking a look at it. I think we should probably take a look at a French Tarrasch game at some point. You know, Tarrasch is not here, so I'm not getting pressed by him to you know, go over a Tarrasch game. But generally, I would say this opening is better for this opening is better for white. Possibly not as much as a perfectly played mainline French, but overall, in terms of analysis, very solid. Black generally, or white generally, has no issues. If he chooses a route in which he maintains the full center. Move like c3 becomes much more available, and then c5 can be responded to by the c3 pawn. Pawn takes d4, pawn takes d4. Everything basically in that opening is based around being solid and not bad, and but not pressing black as hard as the mainline French tends to. Anyways, that's kind of a brief overview. Those are a few of the lines. If you're interested, we can go over it some more. If anyone's interested, we can take a look. But I just wanted to get on to the next game here. This is okay. Top is playing black. Let's take a look from black's perspective. And here, e4, d5. It's basically a Scandinavian game. Knight c3, queen a5 Scandinavian. Bishop c4, knight f6, d3, knight c6, and this to this point is relatively normal development. Black has some issues with the c7 pawn. This is vulnerable. White is threatening a discovered check here, and will need to be careful. But I think basically black will be all right. In terms of moves here, queen e5 I think is played sometimes, yeah, but it is sort of strange. Queen e5 can bring this knight forward with development. I don't know if this is the most healthy development line, but after queen e5, gn e2, black has developed his queen, but white has developed all of his minor pieces and has the normal developmental advantage that's common in the Scandinavian. Okay, queen e5, queen e2, bishop f5, and here I actually think I don't think queen e2 is the best. I think knight ge2 is the best. I mean, given that white's in a position where he should be developing straightforwardly, and here basically black has used this inefficiency followed by another inefficiency, which is knight takes c7. To try to advance his position. Basically, black's showing a little better here after the queen trade, which moves the knight forward and doesn't really help white at all, followed by allowing black to basically trade off his knight for white's good squared bishop. So here, the position quickly goes from the standard, white has a small advantage out of the Scandinavian, to a black advantage after these pieces get neutralized. Now, especially now before this knight has developed, white and black's development has equalized. And that's really not something that should happen in the Scandinavian. In the Scandinavian opening, basically, one of the big... let me take a look. No, I think... I don't have that sorted by your chess.com name. Let me take a look. It's a good question, so I'll get to it right now. Let's see. If it was it's the next one. It's the next one, Reckless. Thank you very much for sending it in, and it's the next game after this one. I need to catalog it a little better, so I have the chess.com names matched to the Twitch names. But your game is next, Reckless, so thank you very much for sending it. We'll get to it shortly. So here basically, what black has equalized in terms of development in the Scandinavian. These three minor pieces go up against these three minor pieces, and this overall is going to be better for black than white. The main advantage of the Scandinavian is you basically, there's practical comp having to do with getting your queen out so early and it being kind of a frowned upon opening, and then having good chances with the queen at the basically with being responded to by a better development by white. If white doesn't manage to basically improve on black's development, if black is able to develop as quickly, opening, basically this opening is going to be better for black if he can equalize in terms of development, because that's his real biggest weakest point. Knight d5 is an error here. Knight takes c4, knight takes c7, knight takes d2, and here basically, bishop to b4 will lead to a win in material. What's going to end up happening here is black's going to get he's going to get two full pieces for a rook, and that's a material gain. So here now, black has 2 bishops for a rook, and that's that's an advantage going into the endgame. Continuing to go through this, bishop g4 and castles queenside does pressure white's d-pawn. So that's definitely a thematic concept in the Scandinavian. That depends on what line it is. I mean, if that's the Scandinavian d4 line. Bishop g4 and queenside castling do pressure the d-pawn. Black can have some good attacks, regaining central control, and a lot of force being put on that d-pawn, especially if c3 isn't played or knight c3 is played before c3. So that's another key advantage in a normal Scandinavian. We can take a look in a second. It looks like black's able to convert this endgame relatively well. It looks like this is reasonably good for black. That pawn ends up getting lost, I'm sure, to that bishop, and black wins this pawn endgame. Let's go back to the opening because I want to address your question, Mario. Thank you very much for asking it. So knight c3, queen a5. This is not a line in which d4 is played, but the lines that you're talking about, Mario, are lines like queen d6, d4, c6, say knight f3, bishop g4, bishop to c4, e6, bishop e7, knight d7, castles queenside, and then pressures exerted on this d4 pawn. Threats of bishop takes f3 and queen takes d4 definitely happen. And basically, I agree. I think that is one of the main thematic concepts in the Scandinavian. But this particular line, the queen a5 line, partially because the queen is no longer on the d file, the queen's sort of displaced. Those d4, and now also white didn't play d4. Those pressure on white's d pawn is not as pronounced as in some Scandinavians. But you're making a very good point, and that is another key advantage for black in the Scandinavian. It's one of the reasons why black plays the Scandinavian. I mean, the most important thing is really that white plays d4 here. Let's take a look at this opening theory. d4 is the most common move here, Mario. So you're absolutely right. This d3 is the second most common move, but d4 is the most common move. In this line, there still may be pressure applied on the d-pawn with like knight c6, bishop f5, e6, and either queenside castles or rook d8. But overall, I would say that this pressure being placed on the d4 pawn tends to be a little bit easier and more common in situations in which the queen is on like d6, probably d6 and not d8. But the d6 line in particular involves the pressure on the d pawn. Bishop gets played to g4, pressure in terms of bishop takes f3, queen takes d4, and then basically white will get that pressure and exploit this pin from the bishop on g4 on the knight on f3, usually by exchanging it if the pawn is really hanging. Anyways, very interesting. And let's take a look. Knight c3, queen a5, and queen e5 is an interesting move. I know this is book. I know if you look at this, I know this is the second most common line here. And it is true that the queen needs to move. I mean, the first most common line is queen f5. Second most common line is queen e5. But I guess I would say here, basically, queen e5 looks a little bit awkward to me because, it can be responded to by g knight e2 and forward white's development. I try not, in the Scandinavian, white is already sort of advancing his development and making your queen move with his advancing moves, gaining tempo. I wouldn't, as a general principle, I would try not to give white the ability to improve on your queen moves. So like queen e5, maybe knight e2 is not the most natural square for development for that knight, but it still moves the knight forward in a situation where you didn't have to. Hey Matt Yop, welcome to the stream. Thank you for being here. So here I guess queen f5 is the number one move. Queen e5 is the second most common move. And on queen e5, queen e2 is an error. The move here is knight to e2, advancing development. Black's given white an opportunity to advance development basically freely as a response to this check. So basically playing a non-developing move, queen to e2, is not fundamentally correct here. Queen takes, knight takes, a6, castles queenside, e6, bishop f4, b5. And I mean, basically, I guess I would say Black's going to probably play a game where he's going to be expanding on the queen side here. It's Scandinavian where, white castles queen side is kind of interesting. You can have some aggressive attacks on the queen side and just keep advancing over here. But I guess I would say bishop to d6, straightforward developing moves for white, and then advance the attack, like bishop d6, bishop d7, maybe knight a5, knight takes b3, and then a5. Basically, that's kind of the structure of the attack that I would look at. So then a5 after that, after the bishop on d7 develops or defends the b5 pawn. But yeah, I just want to keep going through this game. In terms of improvements here, I think Black did well. I mean, it's a little bit unusual to stop the analysis here, but Black already has like a pretty good lead. I guess I'll maybe take another second to look through the further part of it. But basically, Black has what is the winning lead. It's a 2-pawn advantage. He's up 2 pieces to a rook. He wins a full piece. Certainly from this place, after Black is up a piece completely, it's worth, I don't think we need to go through this endgame any further. But I think the most important parts of this game, I guess the thing, in terms of fundamentals, I guess I would say, I would revisit queen e5. I understand it's probably fine, it's in the opening book, but, it's not what I would play. I mean, basically with BND2 or GNE2, this full knight, basically gives white a solid initiative. White now has his full development. Black is behind. He hasn't developed either of his bishops, this gives this e5 square is not that much better in my mind than the f5 square, and you've given white an extra move to develop. If you play queen f5 instead, I would bet that knight f3 is still one of the most commonly played moves here. Yeah, knight ge2 or knight f3 is played, in 100% of the book lines out of queen f5. So, if you're playing queen e5, you're basically drawing knight e2, and that's sort of something that Black wanted to do anyways. Queen d6, knight g3, e6. Now it's sort of like a queen d6 Scandinavian, which I'm more familiar with as a general structure. But basically white still has a solid initiative here, an initiative-sized lead. So in terms of improvements, I feel like Black played this pretty well. Scandinavian is pretty aggressive. Queen e5 is a move that is in the opening book, but I don't it wouldn't be my preference there. I think here everything's basically fine, and then the balance shifts very quickly. Knight plays to d5, knight takes c4, knight takes c7, king d7, and now you basically get those two pieces for the pawn. Overall, it's a very accurate game by Black. Thank you very much, Julia. Thank you very much for joining the stream. Your game is 5th, so it's going to be probably in about 45 minutes. Or maybe, sorry, if we're finishing the 2nd now, I would say your game will be in 35 minutes. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us, Julio, and thank you for helping to contribute with all of those games. Like, super helpful to get plenty of games sent in, that's for sure. I don't think I think this endgame isn't super worth analyzing. I think maybe, white should stop trading here. Basically, white is down material, and should probably try to keep the pieces on as opposed to trading the knight on d4 for the bishop on f5. Just as a general principle, like, you know, trading off in a position where you're already down is not generally correct. I understand wanting to disrupt the bishop pair. I'm sure that's why that was done. But overall here, black plays well. Not a lot of opportunity for black to improve, really. I think, you know, basically it's a very solid game. Queen a5 is a Scandinavian line that I don't know as well as I know queen d6. Queen e5 is also a move I wouldn't have played, but appears to be okay based on the opening theory. And here, I guess I would just say, you know, black is better. You know, black will have to basically play chess, you know, execute tactics. But in terms of general strategy, I think both for white and for black, it's already sort of determined at this point. Black is going to basically use his extra piece to exert pressure on some vulnerable pawn, probably, you know, one of the queen side. And white's going to try to keep pieces on and potentially, you know, win some type of material. White's going to probably need to get 2 pawns back in order to be in okay shape. But this game's already practically over. I guess the big error I would say here was playing knight to d5. This just wasn't as good an idea as you know, holding everything on the board, maybe bishop to b3. But yeah, I think after those 2 pieces went for the rook, that offered black a winning advantage. Especially the 2 minor pieces were the bishop pair, which, you know, makes it even stronger. You know, basically an even stronger advantage there of the 2 pieces versus the rook. But here, you know, I basically would say that that black is fine, and it's, you know, a good game. Nothing in particular. You know, just very solidly played by black. An unusual opening. But black has generally accepted this opening as a, you know, basically black has this opening in mind as a useful resource. And this, you know, after this position, basically black is leading. Not much to correct or to add there. I wouldn't have played queen e5, but it is an opening line, so I guess it's fine. Very solid, accurately played game by both sides. And not a whole lot to add. Very strong Scandinavian game that was simplified by this point in the game. You know, 20 moves of theory, and then, you know, 20 more moves of black basically exploiting an already decided game. But yeah, overall very interesting. Thank you very much for sending that, David. And I really appreciate you sending it and helping out with the stream. Thank you. Let's take a look at the next one. This is Big Shaq playing white. All right. Cool. Okay. So this is the game we were just looking at. So this is Reckless Rowan's game. So here Reckless Rowan is playing white, and here pawn takes c4, f3, pawn takes e6, and I think everything's, you know, basically. I'm just gonna play through it really quickly to make sure I sort of understand the themes of this game. Okay, interesting. All right, so white plays against the Benko Gambit. So c4, c5 here, d5, b5. This is an interesting gambit. You know, d4 players will have to face this periodically. In this game, you know, I'll just play through the most common Benko lines. C takes b5, a6, bx a6, g6, knight c3, b takes, e4, bishop takes, king f1. Okay, this is basically the mainline Benko. The characteristics of this opening: black expands quickly on the queen side. You know, this rook gets good mobility. And you know, this king gets to f1, which is sort of disruptive, but, you know, the bishop has played to a6, and moves have been played to cause this disruption, so it basically turns out equal. I'm going to guess the eval in terms of being positive here is probably plus 0.7. These centralized pawns provide pretty much complete center control for white. This queen side is definitely controlled by black, but it's not super important. So overall, I would say, you know, white holds most of the relevant squares here, and things are pretty comfortable. King F1 and I guess 0.7, but it's actually all the way up to +1. White is just better here. G3, King G2, Knight F3, Rook F1, or Rook E1, castles by hand. I don't even know if that's worth it. I don't know if this king is really that vulnerable there. We can play through a few more lines to just see how White handles this kingside position, but castling by hand seems like a pretty intuitive choice. Yep. Okay, so that's what he does. Yeah, I think basically, A3 probably. But overall, I think, White's chance is probably to, potentially play E5, but, I guess I would also lean towards starting a kingside attack. The king's not really that vulnerable. I think a kingside attack, potentially all the way with queen to H1, could be possible. Or maybe rook to H1 first, and then H4 starts getting played. Black will probably try to direct attention to this queen side where he's better, but I don't really think he'll get I don't really think he'll get anything out of it. Anyways, this is interesting. D4, Knight F6, C4, C5, and then D5 is basically the main line move here. Instead, so D5, B5, and then B3 is played instead of C takes B5. Cool. Well, it still didn't match our agreement. But I'm happy that someone got bishop and knight. I can go on about that a little further. I mean, to be honest, I think bishop and knight is useful it's very useful about once every 10,000 games or so. But general positional understanding is probably better to understand overall. Interesting question, Vertwitch. But yeah, and I think the marginal benefit of learning it is very low, except at a very high level. It's just not the quickest return on time. I feel like it's just one of those things that chess teachers sort of show because it's something that you can prove that you taught. And out of principle, I just think that those types of things are pretty useless. I guess, what I would say about those types of things is that they're great for when they're useful, but if they're useful 1 out of every 10,000 games, there's just not much value in that. In teaching, I think what people like to do is they like to show that they were able to teach something, because otherwise they didn't add any value. And I think that's the biggest kind of deprivation of value of all, is if someone's just teaching you something because they're trying to prove that they're adding value. It's very easy to show something, to show that you taught it. So I guess I would say it's sort of a trick. But anyways, yeah, at the end of the day, it is good to learn. I would highly recommend that you learn it. But don't expect it to happen more than 1 out of every 10,000 games, and and make sure that you and basically be happy with that win that you get out against a draw 1 out of every 10,000 games. I don't think that's where your time is best spent. I don't really support teaching something that obscure when you can teach something that you teach something that's less tangible, but is useful in every single game. Like better positional strategy. Better positional strategy is relevant in every single game. You can't prove it the same way that you can prove that you've taught bishop and knight versus king. You can really prove that you taught a bishop and knight versus king technical solution. But I really think in terms of usefulness, in terms of time expended, I think you add much more value if you focus on things like better positional understanding, which is always relevant, as opposed to bishop and knight versus king, which is relevant to make a win versus a draw 1 out of every 10,000 games. Anyways, that's my position on that particular one. I think it's one of those really silly things that people do. My goal here is, I think there are excellent resources to learn bishop and knight versus king. There used to be one on US Chess Live, and I'm sure that's been adapted somewhere else. But that's not really what I want to do here. I think you can both learn it from better resources than me, and you can learn from, I think you can learn that many places that aren't here. So I don't particularly want to spend time on it. I want to direct my time towards things that I think will offer you the quickest rate of return. just in terms of teaching. But yeah, you know, I just, it's one of those things. It's like, sure, you can prove that you taught it, but like, what value did it actually have? It has a lot of value in showing that you were able to teach at least something, but it's not really that practically valuable. The less tangible things, I think, will show much better rates of return on teaching. So that's why that's one of the particular ones. I'll get off my soapbox on that, and sorry to go on about it. But yeah, I think that one's kind of silly. Yeah, totally. Thank you very much, Matt Yop. Do you have a game link that you can send, or have you sent one already? Whatever the original time that I said it was, yeah, yeah. Please send the link and we'll take a look, Matt Yop. Thank you. C takes b5, a6, b takes a6, g6, knight c3, b takes a6, king takes f1, and here this is pretty much you know, this I guess I would say is better for white. White is better here by about a pawn. This has sort of neutralized this attack. Let's look at this game. This game has b3. b3 is a much less common line. The main line here is c takes b5, like I played through a few times. Knight f3 is also you know, also a relatively common line. b3 is pretty far down the list. It makes intuitive sense. A c4 d5 structure, you know, I think is solid for white. But I think there are liabilities, especially these weaknesses along this this dark diagonal. So let's just play through this. This pawn structure is pretty good for white. The c4 pawn is a little bit backwardated, but I think, you know, that should be okay. That should be able to be held by the bishop on f1. A disadvantage of doing this way and of having this c4 pawn is that this bishop can't get to b5. So you are somewhat limiting the mobility of your bishop. Overall, I bet that this pawn structure is better. But I think the more natural pawn structure, the one that involves e4 and d5, is probably a better way for white to hold onto the center. And that's just the mainline Benko Gambit line. B takes c4, b takes c4, d6, knight c3, g6, bishop e2, bishop g7, f3, knight bd7, e4. Cool. Now white has a huge center. This is solid, and this will be hard for black to break through. I guess rook b8 is the best move, but I guess I'm a little bit impressed by how good the evals are for black here. This is weird. This is a main line. I guess the main line doesn't particularly like the f3 e4 structure. Okay. Interesting. So by the point, you know, basically after f3, you know, the engine is pointing towards an advantage for black. E6, pawn takes e6, f takes e6, d4, or sorry, e4. This is interesting. I mean, white has center control, or a good amount of control over this center, but it's basically you know, based on pawn structure that isn't really that great. A pawn, C pawn, and then E through H pawns. This is way more fractured than black's pawn structure, and black's pawn structure is also somewhat fractured. Cool, yeah, no problem at all, Matt Yop. No, we're super happy to look at it. I'll make that analysis for you, Matt Lop. Is gonna be it's gonna be the May 7th at May 7th at 10 a.m. Eastern. Thank you very much for sending that game, and I'm super happy to get to take a look at it. So yeah, here I just don't think this is. I think that this plan is worth revising. The main Benko Gambit plan offers white good opportunities, good advancements in you know, in the center, good center control for white versus an open queenside for black. But basically, it doesn't matter because white castles kingside, and you know, the queenside is weak. So c takes b5, and you know, you're into basically mainline Benko theory. This big center for white, this open queenside for black, and this ability to get the king over to the king side. Anyways, this so this b3 move, I think this is just sort of conceptually not the correct way to play the Benko Gambit. I would accept the gambit, give up the openness on the queen side, and play knight c3 e4, and basically be in good shape as white. Be prepared to castle kingside or to play king f1 like happens in the main line, and just basically keep going forward with that idea. b3 and this pawn structure has some weaknesses. This you would say, like, okay, well, b3 keeps the pawn structure in the center contiguous, but it sort of doesn't after pawn takes c4. This isolated c-pawn could become a liability, and the focus the black will have on the queen side here will become a liability. e5, bishop d3, and basically white's basically moving forward in kind of a solid, basically white's moving forward in a solid way, but already in a position where he's significantly worse. In terms of errors here, nothing really. I don't know. I mean, basically, the biggest error here, I think this from a strategic perspective, setting up this c4 d5 structure is already not common and not particularly good in the Benko Gambit. The Benko Gambit's a very commonly played line, and we only have 9 lines that involve this pawn structure on move 5. So I would avoid that. I would go with d5 and then pawn takes pawn. So b3 is something that I want to steer you away from. I see that there are a few opening games in it, but I think overall as a concept, just not that strong. That said, we now have kind of an atypical Benko Gambit position. And here, I guess what I would say is, black's gonna try. Black's got a pretty well-made plan here. Black is gonna try advancing on the queen side, and white is going to try to castle kingside and get developed. Bishop b2 is probably a misplacement. Rook to b8 deals with this very easily. Resources are now being expended defending the bishop on b2. But overall, I think basically this leads quickly in black's favor. White's pawn structure is way worse. Black's worst pawn, the one on a7, isn't really directly attackable, whereas this c4 pawn definitely is. Knight a5 can be played, queen a5, and then knight a5 can be played, and pressure can be placed on this c4 pawn. Anyways, knight takes, pawn takes, f4, and basically, black is way better. Yeah, I mean, basically white loses his queen and the position kind of deteriorates. Let's slow down, because the first takeaway, biggest takeaway, and I think I can be fairly blunt on this one. Don't play pawn takes c4 or b3 pawn takes c4. That's just not a good structure for white. I think pawn takes b5 is the way to do this correctly. I understand the reasoning, and I like the idea of keeping the pawn structure contiguous here, but you can keep 2 contiguous pawn structures with pawn takes b5 holding these 2, and then connecting all of these. That leaves white with a better pawn structure at the end of the whole gambit. I understand the desire to take toward the center here, but this just isn't how you play this opening. I think a lot of kind of fundamental problems will end up coming up with this. I mean, black played a gambit, and white's already showing a pretty solid negative. f3 I think is probably a little bit inefficient. Something like knight c3 with e4 in mind is probably better. Developing and playing e4 early to secure white's center is really a good idea here. Knight c3, e4, bishop to d2, and I think basically things are pretty solid in the center. f3 is just a little bit slow. I guess I would say set up e4 not with f3 but with knight c3, e4. That's a way better way to go. After this happens, black's already showing a one pawn advantage. Here's a break for white. E5 is an inaccuracy, allowing you to strengthen and possibly outpost knight on d5. Here I would play knight c3 with knight d5, ready to be played pretty soon after. So yeah, knight c3, knight c6, rook b1, knight h5, queen d5. And overall, yeah, threats on d6. I mean, cool. Bishop d2. But straightforward development, I think, should be helpful for white here. In terms of pawn center, this is actually a really good pawn center for white. This is why the eval changes. This d6 pawn is weak. This basically d6 pawn is a backward pawn that black's probably not going to be able to fix for the rest of the game. So something along the lines of queen d3, rook d1, knight c3, knight b5, and threats on d6. I think overall that's going to be the best way that white plays this. That pawn is just weak and backward, so I would want to make sure that you can get good play against it. That's my recommendation there. And why the engine shifts as a the engine shifts after e5 is played. This backward pawn on an open file is going to provide a target for white for the rest of the game, and a way that white can play this to basically continue. It sort of sets up at least part of a plan for white. It's pretty clear that this is something that white can target, so he should definitely do it. There are many times when this c5, d6, e5 pawn structure is fine for black, but they tend to be, they're exclusively in positions where there's a pawn on d5. That happens in the Benoni sometimes. But this is not so it's an okay pawn structure. It's okay to have this backwards d pawn if the d pawn is inaccessible. But if it's accessible to white on an open file, that's going to be a big liability for black in this game. So, anyways, that's what I would say. Yeah, I think unfortunately this this was basically white's best middle game opportunity, was to cement a plan on this d6 pawn. I would do it with knight c3, knight b5, and then I probably would end up castling kingside, so there's reason to play bishop d3 and knight e2 and then castle. But I would try to do it with knight c3 having been played, and mostly rooks exerting the pressure on d6. Yeah. So I think by this point, black is just way up positionally. In terms of material, this is still technically equal, and then it really collapses after knight to b5 here. This pawn is pinned, so it can't play pawn takes d4. But after bishop to f3, this exchange gets hung first, and then white gives up the full rook, and then basically black wins. So things quickly go south. In terms of this situation, e4, by the time you play e4, you've spent some valuable tempo. The correct idea here was knight c3, e4. Definitely e4 is something that should be played for white here. But I mean, I don't know. I guess it should definitely be played for white in the normal Benko gambit. In this with c4, e4, I have more questions about, and maybe it's less useful if c4 is there. The c4 is usually not there, so I'm assessing the position. I might be skewing my assessment based on the idea that the c4 pawn isn't there right now. So maybe e4 isn't even worth playing here if the d5 pawn is already supported. Maybe here you just develop in a straightforward way. Either way, white should move towards a more development-heavy placement against the Benko. This b3 I think offers you a really tangible thing to change. This just isn't an opening line. I guess it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's just anti-thematic and not not the opening line here. b3 pawn takes c4 is not a line that I know, and not a line that particularly makes sense. And then I would, after this, I would aim and start to advance knight c3, bishop d2, knight f3, e3, bishop d3, and basically you'll be okay. Straightforward development for white. White's not losing. White has sort of distorted the Benko, but has created at least an interesting position that black's probably not super prepared for. Just get developed, play a development-heavy game, and you should be in smooth shape here. Thank you very much for setting the game, good luck. Good luck against the Benko. It's a very interesting game, tough to play against, but that's unless you know that theory extremely well, that's not the opening lines that I think you should be playing. Normal lines in the Benko, just to go through it once again: d4, b5, pawn takes b5. And then games played with knight c3, e4, and strengthen the center. Thanks for sending the game. I hope that was helpful. I guess I would just take a look at b3 versus the mainline Benko. I think a lot was dangerous there, and I think you needed a more development heavy focus. In the early middle game or late opening, early middle game. f3, e4. First, I'm not sure how valuable e4 is when c4 is available, but I would also, aim to play e4 against the knight c3, e4 there. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Reckless. Appreciate it. All right, on to the next one. This is Brian's game. Brian is, I think Brian is playing white here, and let's take a look. Okay, it's against the Caro-Kann, mainline Caro-Kann. I always want to go over this because it's very important to know the mainline Caro-Kann, or in my opinion. It's something that you'll see very frequently in both your games and master games. Bishop f5, knight g3, bishop h5, h4, h6, bishop h5, bishop h7, knight f3, and then usually, so knight f3, and basically, you're planning to take bishop to d3, bishop takes d3, queen takes d3. If you've played it correctly, if you play queen takes d3 on the 10th move. That's always how I learned it. I hope that's a helpful way to learn it. But basically, you have these pawn advances. Just to go through this again, I'll do it out of the opening book this time. d4, d5, knight c3, d takes e4, knight takes, bishop f5, knight g3, bishop g6, h4, h6, knight f3, knight d7, h5, bishop h7, bishop d3, bishop takes, queen takes. That is the mainline Caro-Kann. That is a position that I think is of general interest, regardless of how you, regardless of what you do. But definitely, if you're an e4 player and you'll face the Caro-Kann periodically, this is something that I think is valuable to know. Just a 10-move sequence, not very memorization heavy, but memorizing it to that point, I think is something that's valuable. This is an unusual way to play the Caro-Kann. Knight f3 is way down the list. d4 is basically an 80 to 90% choice here. c4 is also sometimes played. I've played that a couple times. But knight f3 is pretty far down in terms of moves to be played against the Caro-Kann. d5, knight c3 looks right. Bishop to g4, h3, bishop takes f3. This is an unusual Caro-Kann. A lot of pressure getting exerted on d5 here. And overall, I think basically pretty good for white. d4 is a move, knight e2, and then interesting. So bishop c4 is actually a tactical play there, but I think it'll transpose the same. Knight e2 here, redirecting to knight g3. And I think white's probably good. This is pretty good for white, I think. It's a little bit awkward to have the queen on f3, but there have been enough trades here, and the knight is, basically the f3 knight is gone, so it's not depriving that knight of its natural developing square. Knight e2, g3, I think is the way to go. e4, and then here, yeah, knight e2, sure. I guess main lines here, d4 is not the most common line here. The most common line here is e6, d3. I'll just play through the most common sort of line. Basically, white's going to start generating an attack in sort of like why not. If the queen is on f3, you might as well start attacking black's king side. It's basically, you basically are attacking black's king side because you have pieces available to be used on that. This bishop's directed over there. This rook is able to support these pawns, and these pawns are already halfway into their kind of attacking pawn storm positions. So overall, I think white is white is pretty good here. But that's not what's played. Instead, d4. d4 is going to have some similarities where the knight plays knight e2, knight g3. It's almost like d4 played in the early one. Like if you play one knight c3, d4 actually becomes pretty playable. d4 becomes playable, and then knight e2, knight g3 becomes the maneuver. Knight f6, bishop e2. Okay. Bishop e2 is a pretty conservative move. I don't really think there's that much value on this diagonal. So I guess I would offer this as sort of an idea for white to potentially improve. Bishop e2 holds this diagonal, but this diagonal was never really very important. This knight could go to h5, but this isn't really that. I guess I wouldn't say this is a super valuable idea. Do I know how to enable pre-move on chess.com? Yeah, I think I've got pre-move. Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think so. Why do you ask, Matt Yop? I'm kind of curious. I mean, you could check if you want. We have the screen open. Yeah, so this is pretty aggressive. Knight to f4 is a pretty aggressive play. Bishop e2, I think, holding this diagonal is not that valuable. I would push, straight to the c4 diagonal like the opening book says. Basically, this diagonal is much more powerful. Pressure on f7 is solid, and overall here, I think white's in a good place. Say b5, bishop b3, bn d7, castles, knight c5, d3. G6, rook d1, and yeah, I think everything's good here. C3 probably, knight takes, pawn takes, and it is a sacrifice of your bishop pair to that knight. But I think white gets this open file for the rook. That bishop wasn't really going anywhere. C2 was not a great space for it. It would have had to relocate from there pretty quickly. But now, like bishop to g5 and solid pressure on the f6 knight. White's better. Okay. Let's go back. D4, knight e2, and then so the first move that I'm gonna basically make. You've been playing against a very unusual opening. From a conceptual perspective, I think you have a lot of leeway in terms of what to do. Like your opponent's played something unusual. I wouldn't know exactly how to play against this particular Caro-Kann. So definitely you've made intuitive moves. This move, bishop e2, I think is something worth thinking about just as a takeaway from this game. This diagonal just doesn't offer much for this bishop. This diagonal offers a much more straightforward path to attacking. Potentially this bishop could come in for some kingside attack, but it would be really awkward to do it in this way. Basically, with the pawn anchored on e4, bishop c4 becomes the most natural, the most natural space for the bishop to develop, and this diagonal here gets solidified for the bishop. That's what I'd recommend. And overall here, I think white's in a pretty good place. Even without securing this strongest diagonal, h6 is a very quiet move, non-developing move. Basically, I would give the same advice to black here. Like h6 does one thing; it prevents bishop to g5. But white moves away from playing bishop to g5. So why are you playing h6? Yeah, thank you very much for the follow, Spared. Appreciate it. Yeah, so I guess I would just say h6 doesn't really help here. Bishop pawn on g5 is not really that great. Or the bishop on g5 is not really that great. So a pawn move whose sole purpose is defending it is not really that solid. Not what black needs. Black needs a solid attack here. Black needs solid development here. Both sides need solid development here. Bishop c4 is the correct place to be developing the bishop, and h6 is not a move that advances development, and for that reason, I think it's not a great idea. Knight f5 is also played. Knight f5 is easily dealt with. G6, and knight has to go right back to g3. Knight g3. That does weaken the king side a little bit, but not enough to make knight f5 worth it. Instead, what I would do is I would, potentially play. I would probably try to fix things and play bishop to c4 and then d3. But I guess, in terms of, I think moving the knight twice here is not the right concept. I think you do want to play developing moves. d3 is another idea if you're very attached. Since you've committed the bishop to e2, d3 does improve the development of the dark squared bishop. I think development is very important for both sides here. So knight f5, knight c5, and knight e6, sure. Cool. Overall here, I think white is a little bit better. This attack doesn't look that solid. I don't know if you play bishop takes h6, but yeah, no worries, Tarash. No, I think you're really on the right track with that. And if you keep up the good work on that, Tarash, I'm sure you're going to be in a good place very soon. Bishop takes h6 actually looks like a playable tactic, doesn't it? I don't see anything wrong with bishop. What happens on bishop takes h6? Yeah, I guess the queen just gets dislocated. Cool. No, keep up the good work, Tarash. I think you really got a good plan there. I think that will help you improve pretty quickly if you're if you stick to it. Probably regardless of your level, but certainly at class level, tactical training I think is the way to go until you're probably an expert. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's some errors for black here, or some errors for white. Here, I think white's in good position. I think rook c1 is a good idea. It basically controls the c file. Maybe rook c2, rook c1 if you have time. Sure. Control over this c file is good. H4 is a little strange, but I don't know if there's anything better. I actually think bishop d1. Yeah, because basically, this queen is causing a big issue. With the queen controlling this file and able to get into white's position, this queen has a lot of value. I think rerouting the bishop to d1 and then to b3 is probably the best option for white. This keeps that file closed. Basically, the queen can't get in because all the white squares are covered, and letting the queen into the position is an error. So in terms of the second improvement that I have for white here, I think letting the queen into the position was probably the decisive point of this game. Let's just go through this. E4. Okay, so first, black's played something unusual, so I don't have much of any advice on that. Bishop e2, I think, is not the right developing square for this bishop. I think c4 was. Bishop e2, this diagonal just isn't that useful for the bishop. Bishop c4 is more valuable. I recognize the bishop's going to get pushed with like b5, and bishop b3, and a5, and it'll be annoying over there. But bishop c4 is what I would play. H6 there. Okay. And then I think I would steer away from knight to f5 just because it's not a developing move. The knight's already developed on g3. And it's pretty easily dealt with by g6. Then I think white's basically about equal. I think all of these moves were pretty reasonable. And then just the final error, the final opportunity for improvement was just here. I think h4 pushing on this kingside attack is a fine idea. I don't have any problems with it as an idea. But letting the queen into this to this kingside should be really avoided at all costs. So bishop d1 actually effectively does it, which is kind of impressive. I mean, these two bishops basically successfully work together to stop the queen from coming in. So bishop d1, bishop b3, and I think everything's good. Yeah, no, definitely. In a very good place, Tarash. Thank you. Yeah, very happy. So bishop d1, bishop b3. And I think basically white's good. Nothing too exciting there. Just covering all the entrance squares, and white's better. And then after that, the position sort of deteriorates pretty quickly after the queen, the queen gets in on the c file. But those are the three moves that I would look at. In terms of that bishop move, I would look for a more productive diagonal. E2 I think was a little bit weak, basically weak. I think c4 was better. It isn't productive enough is the main point. Bishop c4 is a better play. The second move that I think I would revisit is knight to f5 here. G6 deals with knight to f5 immediately, and there's not really much developmental advancement there. I think I would just, you're moving back to knight g3, and you could have taken that moment to play like d3 or something that would advance the bishop. And overall here, I think you're pretty much good. I think basically white has equalized. And then with bishop to d1 here, white is still, equal or slightly better. So there, basically letting the queen control this file was inevitable, but controlling these squares was really the improvement for white here against the black queen. The black queen didn't have to be let into this position. Things are still potentially sort of tricky. I mean, this knight can move and queen can play to e6 and maybe to a2. But I think with bishop d1 and bishop to b3 followed on the next move, it's going to be really hard for black to advance on this queen side. This would have been a saving move. This would have given you a plus equals position, and yeah, I think you're good after that. So definitely, definitely look towards bishop d2, bishop d1, and I think things are pretty solid. Interesting game. Definitely a few different positional concepts at play. I think I think in general, if you have more time or you played this again, I think you would see that bishop move is not on the most productive diagonal, and I think you would see that the queen is if you can prevent the queen from getting in, you definitely should, and I think that's that's another takeaway from this game. Overall, very solid game. Thank you very much for sending the game. Brian, and yeah, please keep sending them. I'm very interested. This was really interesting and a good instructional game. So yeah, please keep sending them. Super interesting stuff, and yeah, thank you very much for your help with that. Hope that was somewhat of a helpful analysis. Okay, cool. On to the next one. This one is from Mr. Sorry, this one is from Julio. Let's take a look at Julio's game here. Okay, just pulling this up. Cool. Yeah, sure, go ahead, Tarash. Yeah, so e4, so cool. So this is Julio's game. Julio's playing this one as white, I think, right? Julio is playing this as white. And, cool. Yeah, let's take a look. So, Julio's playing against the Sicilian. Early d4. Early d4 is usually fine. Smith-Morra Gambit has its own theory, so that's that's cool. I don't know it super well, but if you basically it's a very playable opening, pretty solid. And black makes early deviations here. So overall in this opening, I would look at Smith-Morra. Okay, sure. This is already sort of an unusual opening for white. But playable, so I wouldn't want to deter you from that. I guess, yeah. I mean, I assume the correct answer to that is Tarash, right? It's an interesting question. So yeah, so c3, d takes c3 is the most common. Knight takes c3, and white's basically got sort of something close to equality, but good. Yeah, sure. Please send the game, Spared. Thank you very much for that. I think to rush. You based your game off of him, right? Yeah, please send the game spared. Here, I'm gonna post the link to the Discord. You guys can post on the Discord. That's probably the best way to do this. But yeah, here, let me copy that and send you the Discord link. This is the Discord link for you spared. Please just post a game on there if you'd like. But yeah, so here, C3 is probably the best, and F4, knight F3, and I think basically good support of this basically good support on this bishop file. In terms of advancing, I guess, yeah, I don't know. This is a sideline, right? So let's just go through the game. Bishop c4 is on. Yeah, no, this is your game, Julia. So I wanted to make sure that we looked at it. Here, e5, knight d5, pawn takes d5, knight c6, bishop c4, and knight b6. So this is an early bishop c4. I'm sure that the main move here is knight to f3, right? But bishop c4 does challenge this knight more quickly. Then the bishop will have to play to b3, but you'll still have this long diagonal, so I guess it sort of makes sense. In terms of eval, pawn takes d4, knight c6, bishop c4. Okay, I mean, it's a pressing move. I think this is interesting, at least. The main move being knight to f3, but bishop c4 is a response that's pretty solid, I think. Cool, yeah, thanks, Spared. I will add this. Spared, your game is in for May 7th at 6 during the 6:05 p.m. stream. Thank you very much for sending it, Spared, and please, please keep sending them. Super helpful. Thank you very much for that. It'll be on Friday at 7 during the 6:05 p.m. stream. Cool. Bishop b3 threatens this f7 pawn. And overall, this is good pressure for white. Awesome, cool. Yeah, I got it, Spared. It's in for 6:05 p.m. Eastern on the 7th. Cool. So this bishop now has this long diagonal. Straightforward developing moves like knight f3, bishop e3, knight c3 should all be good for white. White has control of the center, but black has the potential to undermine it. Overall, this has some characteristics that are similar to like the Alekhine's gambit or Alekhine's opening. Kind of this loose, advanced center pawn structure, but interesting. An interesting deviation in the Smith-Morra as well. D6, F4, G6, bishop takes F7 looks like a practical sacrifice, right? Cool, good tactic. Bishop takes F7, king takes F7, knight to G5, queen takes G4. Makes sense to me. No. I mean, I definitely understand that line of thinking, Julio. If you know what you're doing, that can be definitely a helpful thing to do. Bishop to H6, king E8, and here, I mean, I think white is better. Yeah, so this is a good win for white. So I'm gonna basically make the assessment, right? Unless you want to learn opening lines, I'm sort of going to make the assessment that you're interested in playing. Hey, welcome, Electric Horse. Thank you very much for joining. But yeah, so I'm gonna make the assessment that you're interested in keeping your openings basically the same way that they are, right, Julio? I guess I would say they're that what you want to do is keep you want to basically keep your openings the way that they are, because no, I mean it's pretty straightforward. This, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure I would want to talk you out of playing unusual openings. Smith-Morra Gambit to start with is a pretty small, pretty rare opening, right? It looks like about, there's 500,000 games, and it's about a 1%, played about 1% of the time. That's fine. It doesn't mean necessarily that it's bad, but it's a step off of modern, it's a step off of general theory. Bishop c4 here is also a less than 1% played move. Knight f3 is the main line here. Knight f3, you end up being able to play the bishop to c4 anyways, but I wouldn't dismiss bishop to c4 either. I wouldn't want to talk you out of this stuff, especially if you know it. These kinds of less commonly played openings can definitely be helpful. So I'm not going to want to talk you out of it. I just would say if there's a if there's basically a if there's a big deviation from general opening theory, that can be fine. But it's definitely something that I think you should be aware of. But there's no reason to not play. Doing something that's not commonly done just because it's not commonly done is not a great reason either. I think you can do well playing less commonly played openings if you're very comfortable with them, and they fundamentally make sense. Here, knight f3 is proposed. I guess I would just say your opening, or basically your center is getting a little bit loose here. Already d4 and e5 are kind of a problem, but with not a problem, but they're kind of attack. They are somewhat vulnerable and will require resources to remain defended. Here with f4. I think you can play knight f3. Basically, the engine is saying knight f3 instead of f4. F4 is probably fine. I think you may have to play d takes e5 here. So say d takes e5, d takes e5, and this allows the queens to be traded off. But I don't think this is particularly terrible. It just isn't something that you might want to do. So the important thing about f4 is that this f4 as opposed to knight f3 here. With f4, you either lose a pawn on d4 or open yourself up to trading queens. Trading queens is not terrible, but I think that generally this is this is basically fine for this is basically fine for white. But it's a disadvantage of playing f4 over knight f3. Knight f3 is the main line and the straightforward developing move. Yeah, there's definitely some truth to that, Tarash, for sure. Bishop takes d1 instead of king takes d1. Interesting question. Yeah, we can take a look at that. F4, and then pawn takes e4, pawn takes e4, queen takes, bishop takes d1. Yeah, I like it. I mean, it defends c2, and knight d4 was a pretty likely move for black here anyways, winning the white's better squared bishop. I guess, yeah, I guess I would say electric horse, good point. I would prefer bishop takes d1 as opposed to king takes d1. This diagonal's not really doing anything right now for the bishop, so yeah. Bishop takes d1 instead of king takes d1. I don't think white has to continue attacking there. I think, you can just sort of leave it. But you can play like knight f3, knight c3, and get your development back together. White's game, now it's sort of headed in a much more drawish direction. My advice here would be in this like super open, relatively symmetrical game, just focus on quick development and then try to set up kind of a good attack. Maybe bishop e3 is good. If you could double these b pawns, that would be good. But yeah, this is an interesting position. So I think knight f3 is an improvement over f4. Rather than instead of f4 allowing that, I think you should play knight f3. Holding these pawns, pawn takes, and then you could go through the same thing, but you could also play d5 here. Then the knight goes to a5 or something. Knight c3, and then there's going to be a lot of pressure on this e5 pawn. So yeah, so knight f3 over over f4, I would say. And then bishop takes, great tactic, cool. I think in terms of the rest of the game, I think you're in pretty good shape for the rest of it. Queen takes might have been an improvement over bishop takes or over rook takes. Sure. Yeah, no, because I think the game pretty much ends after this, right? Like, oh, I guess not. Yeah, okay, so we get back into sort of a competitive position, but it's a super tactical game from here. Yeah, let's look at e6. So e6 is played, and then knight to b5 is I looked to the engine to get to do that quickly, but knight to b5 is a better way to exert pressure on d6. And here, yeah, like d takes e5, f takes e5 maybe. But this d6 looks like a pretty good outpost for that knight. If white can make that happen, he definitely should. Knight, oh, white playing e6 at some point. Sure, yeah. I don't really think you have much of an opportunity to, unless you're talking about right here. So on this move, you could potentially play e6, but basically as soon as this bishop moves there to g4, you can already play. I mean, here you can already play bishop takes f7 and have the same attack as a move later. Basically bishop takes f7 was available as a tactic a move before even. This d6 pawn opened up the center. You can play it here, king takes, knight takes, and everything's good. Yeah, good place for white. Sure, yeah, let's look at that. Here, I don't know, bishop takes, pawn takes. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I think this isn't quite. It's a good idea. I like the idea. I definitely think we can. I think there are many positions where you can play moves like e6. I just think it was never. It was there. Like I don't think if you play it now, it's very good. You play bishop takes e6. Yeah, e6, bishop takes e6, pawn takes e6. Maybe knight to g5, but this is the only move where e6 is not. Bishop takes f7, which you played and which was good, was better than e6 from the point that this bishop moves to g4. So here even bishop takes f7, king takes f7, and then knight g5, queen takes g4, and you're in a pretty good place as white. So yeah, overall good tactic, good take on f7. Rook takes. Yeah, I think you're just, you're in a pretty solid place here. Here, I think basically, black, black's going to take e5. I thought there was a moment here where white is actually a little better. What's the line here? Queen takes d4, knight takes, rook f1. I think I think queen takes d4 is just bad because it allows queen takes d4, knight takes d4, and then rook f1, and then this bishop's not going to go anywhere, or this bishop's not going to get attacked in any way. What was really a problem in this position was when the knight forked on e5, forking the bishop and rook. That was a problem. Queen takes d4 here. So I think if you just trade off the queens, you're better here, right? I mean, your position is equal, but you have like some crazy attacks with the bishop. You're probably going to win a pawn, at least the g6 pawn. So I think you can trade off here and be good with it. Queen takes, knight takes, rook f1, and things are going pretty well for white. Not really that much. I think white's in a pretty good place. There's just not too much danger. So overall, after knight takes e5, black's up, and black, I guess black blunders with allowing, and yeah, good tactics, bishop g7. Can't black play to defend after rook f1? Yeah, I mean, yes. The answer is yes to that, Electric. So knight here, rook f1, bishop. Bishop. The pawn's there on e5, right? Or do you mean here? I don't think bishop f6 is ever fully playable, right? I think there's always you know, the bishop on f7 will just move away if bishop to f6 gets played. Yeah, yeah, but I mean, it's still, you know, that's still just a trade, and the material's equal. Hey, welcome, Humunculus. Thank you for joining the stream. But yeah, white ends up winning this game. So in terms of places to look at for improvement, I think, you know, basically you recognize you're playing somewhat unusual, you know, some unusual endgame here, right? Bishop takes f7, king takes, you know, king f8. Good tactic for sure, Julio. I think that was a good idea. Here, I think, you know, basically this queen takes is okay. But yeah, this is a very tactical position, Julio. So the main focus, I say to everybody on the stream, you know, the quickest way that you can improve if you're not yet an expert, what you can do is, I would say 1 hour of tactics a day for a month using a tactics trainer of your choice. Like Chess Tempo's got a good free one. You know, Lichess, I think people really like Puzzle Storm. And Chess.com, Puzzle Rush, Puzzle Battle are the 4 that I usually recommend. But I think, yeah, I think those are a really good choice. If you do those for an hour a day for a month, you'll really improve, and basically, you know, you'll be able to kind of iron out a lot of the volatility in the position. Here, like, I'll show you something from the analysis, Julio. You played a great game. Bishop takes f7 was a great tactic that you saw, and you know, it basically won you this game. Bishop h6 also was a great tactic, but you know, here, queen takes d4. You know, basically the tactical sight, I think, will help you see things like, you know, after queen takes d1, knight taking e5 is going to fork this bishop and rook. And instead, if you trade knight takes, rook e1. Yeah, Puzzle Battle, Puzzle Rush from chess.com. Lichess has one, I think, called Puzzle Storm, or Chess Tempo has a free puzzle trainer. Yeah, those are the ones I always go with, Humunculus. They're all good. You know, maybe there's slight differences, but, you know, really it's much more important that you put the time in than you, you know, than the differences between them. I just an hour a day for a month on those, and I guarantee you'll see like a really, you know, it's a tangible difference. I would very much, I'm not, you know, I wouldn't bet my life, but yeah, Tarash's plan is excellent. I really think that's a good idea. But yeah, so white is better here with trading the queens, and slightly worse after knight takes e5. So yeah, overall great tactics, and with a little bit more, I think you really, you know, would have won this game. This kind of volatility on this game analysis. Yeah, sure. I'll just give you that right now, Matt Yop. It's right here. Awesome. And yeah, basically, this is yeah, it was a good game, Julio, for sure. But I think, you know, with good tactical training, you can iron out the volatilities here. You can not allow these 2 black bumps to happen, and you can hold on to this big white, you know, like this edge for you here. Basically, you want to make it so it's flat, is the point. So like from here to here, this is the type of play that you're interested in, or you're interested in it only heading your direction from this kind of flat line. With great tactical training, I think, yeah, I think basically you can iron this stuff out. But yeah, overall, I think you've played great. You had 2 big tactical sites, you know, that regained this position. So like, look, I mean, you basically had like an 8-move flip in your direction, 8-point flip in your direction, and it's good. I mean, you know, if you want to do an overhaul of your openings, you could try that. You know, we do like a lot of tactical, you know, basically opening theory and stuff. It might be helpful if you're, you know, if you're interested in learning the main lines. But overall, you're in a pretty good, in a similar situation. I think you would be able to win, and, you know, with enough tactical training. But unfortunately, I can't teach that. I think I can give you advice on strategy and openings and stuff, but I think at the end of the day, the tactics training, I would recommend the tactics trainers that were just posted in the chat, but I think that's the fastest way that you can improve. And I think if you use those, you'll be in a good place. So that's what I would say on this topic. Yeah, absolutely. What would you like, Tarash? Thank you very much for sending that game, Vertwitch. Vertwitch is in for May 7th at 6:05 p.m. Eastern. And if anyone else sends, it'll probably be that session. Okay, cool. And then I'll add an English prep also for Tarash on Thursday at 6:05 p.m. Eastern. Or sorry, not Thursday, Friday, the 7th. The 7th. Cool. Yeah, sure. I'll take a look at the English opening, Tarash. Sounds good. Okay, cool. So I want to get to a few more games here. We have Mr. Onion and Bolt. I think we're going to have to go through these pretty quick, but I think we'll be okay. I'm going to take a look at Bolt's game. I think Mr. Onion, if Mr. Onion is here, we will take a look. But I want to go through these relatively quickly. Yeah, no problem, Julio. No, please come back. Julio, your next game, Julio, is tomorrow morning during the 10 a.m. stream. Yeah, I'll take a look at the game today and try to come up with some analysis. But yeah, thank you for being here, Julio. And the next one is tomorrow at 10 a.m. So thanks for being here. Okay, cool. Chess Bolt's game. This is very early. Some early gambit for black. This is pretty interesting. Vienna game with f6. This is not that common. So Vienna game with f6, f4, and basically here, white is capitalizing on some awkward positioning by black. The e pawn and f pawn have been traded for the f pawn and the d pawn, and I think white's got a better position after this bishop pair gets traded off. This is just sort of unusual. Can you take on f4 immediately and play h5? So like for white. So if okay, so knight f3, pawn takes e5, e5, queen h5 here. Yeah, you can, but I don't think it's that great. It just sort of moves this g6 pawn forward. The queen's not that great on f3 here either because of knight d4. The queen's just going to get forced back to d1. But it's a good question, and basically white's got a kind of not that great position. So yeah, so queen f3, knight d4, and d4, and basically black went through this big effort to try to make it so that that he would take with the bishop here and not the knight. I don't think there's much reason to do that. I think white's just sort of better here. Queen e4 maybe. Bishop g5 is good. But overall here, I think yeah, things are basically fine for white. White's got better center control, and then white, black hangs a piece. A lot of tactics here. I don't know if there's that much value in me going through all of it. I think I think basically the thing is I don't think I can help much teaching tactics. Like, maybe I could do a day where I went through all the different types of tactics once or twice, but the tactics trainer is how you learn tactics. A teacher can't really teach you that. So these highly tactical games, once the position is decided, I don't think I have much value add there. So yeah, so bishop takes f6 is probably not right. I think here I would play bishop to h4 and maintain this pin. Overall, this pin is good. And if black has to play g5 to disrupt this pin with this bishop, his kingside's going to be mangled and vulnerable for the rest of the game. Also, you'll come off of that g5, bishop g3 move with this attack on e5. So overall, good for white. Yeah, let's take a look at electric horses opening for just a second. E4, E5, sorry, E4, E5, knight F3, F6, knight takes. Yeah, that would be an example, electric, for sure. And there's some sort of, there's some threats in the Latvian gambit that are kind of like that. Overall, though, F6 I think is just not playable for black. I think white gets a good position. Trading off this knight for that bishop makes sense to me. And then I would maintain this. Pin. You've played this bishop to g5 to get this pin. I think it's a strong pin, and you might as well keep it because the cost of because the cost of g5 is too big for white here. Just play bishop g3, have the threat on e5, and pretty good. Is that, I didn't know that's what it was called, but I think that, yeah, I think it's just unfortunately not playable. I understand the why you would want to play f6 against, like, especially it makes some sense to me against knight f3, but against knight c3 especially, I think f6 is just not the right concept. Knight takes, bishop g5. And here I think white's just good. Basically, bishop b5 is probably, kind of an unusual diagonal to put this on. Maybe I would play queen h5, hoping for knight f7, and play bishop g4, bishop c4 after that. Yeah. So it's, yeah, no, that's right. I would say that's true, electric. It's dubious, but not completely losing. So yeah, so queen h5 I think is an idea. Bishop, I don't know the right diagonal for the bishop. Bishop b5 isn't terrible, but I wish you could play bishop to c4. Bishop to b3, and rook to g8, bishop takes g8, and white's smooth sailing. Not many improvements for white, really. The game sort of goes in white's direction quickly. In terms of moves that I think white could have potentially improved, I wouldn't have played bishop takes f6 here. You have the bishop pair, you got it pretty much for free, so I'd hold on to it. I would play bishop to h5 and make black chase you away on this one. This is a good pin for you, so it's worth something. So with g5, I would not play. I basically would play bishop to g3. I would not immediately play bishop takes f6 for against h6. I just think it makes black's position better, and this pin is a problem for black. So in general, you don't want to solve your opponent's problems. You want to have them continue. So bishop takes d8 threat is big. Pin on knight f6 is big, and the only response really being g5 is conceptually pretty important. Maybe knight g6 could be played. I'm not sure. But definitely make black chase you away. Don't trade into this don't trade your good bishop for this average knight. Bishop b5. I don't know if that was the right diagonal, but it was basically fine. And then bishop takes g8, and you're won as white. So very good game. Good tactics. Good job seeing what was available to you. And in terms of improving the position. I'm not sure this was the best diagonal for the bishop. The c4 diagonal has to be in this position the best light squared diagonal. Maybe you could force the bishop to c4 with queen to h5. Maybe. But overall, bishop b5 worked fine and ended up winning that rook on g8. So pretty good. Thank you very much for the for sending the game, Bolt. Please keep sending them. I think definitely a lot of things a lot of things to look at, and definitely interesting to see the Damiano opening here. Please keep sending your games, and I also highly recommend tactics training. I think it could be super helpful. This game was decided by tactics, and I think a lot of games that you'll see are going to be decided by tactics. So doing a tactics trainer for an hour a day for a month, I think, is a good plan. I think that'll help. And yeah, please keep at it, Bolt. Please keep sending me games, and thank you very much for participating in the stream. All right, we have one last game, It's Mr. Onions, and I want to go through this one a little bit quickly, unfortunately, but we will definitely get to it. This is Monsieur Onion playing white against Jan Carlson, and we will look at this. But we're gonna have to look at this one, unfortunately, quickly. I have another thing that I am hoping to start at 12. Anyways, this is Mr. Onion's game. Mr. Onion is playing white, I think. Yep, Mr. Onion is playing white, and he plays the Sicilian Alapin. Okay, we've looked at the Sicilian Alapin. The Sicilian Alapin is intuitive because it allows white to play this center controlling move d4, supported by c3. And here, basically white has a good position. This c4 move is interesting. It sort of locks in the white bishop. The bishop can still develop to e2, and maybe through f3 could start pushing on d5. But for now, this closes that position. White could try to immediately undermine with b3, but overall threats on c4. Anyways, let's keep looking at this. I'm sort of curious to see where the divergence is. d5, e takes, bishop e3, c4, and basically white's a little better here, I'm sure. Whether to, white has to decide whether to undermine the c4 pawn immediately with b3. But overall, this is going to be a hard pawn structure for white to maintain. Here, castles, cool. Basically, we're in kind of an interesting position. Knight f1 is interesting. Definitely white's mobility, the mobility of white's knight on d2 is limited. So knight f1 probably does make a good amount of sense here. I'm sort of wondering if white had to let this get so locked up. I guess b3, the issue with b3 is they could always be responded to by b5. But I don't know. I guess I'm a little surprised that this is already so favorable to black. I guess g3 is probably not the move to develop this bishop. I think here basically an improvement would be playing b3. This puts pressure on this queenside structure immediately. I understand g3 because getting your bishop on this fianchetto is probably a good idea. This d5 pawn is attackable, but the rest of the position isn't. So g3, bishop g2, and white is in a pretty good place. But I think b3 is better. But g3 still makes intuitive sense even if the eval shifts a lot. Bishop g2, cool. This is the diagonal for the bishop now. Yeah, overall, yeah. I mean, I guess I would say we're equal. A lot of game left to be played. Maybe b3 now, but I don't know. If you're sort of now you probably and now basically with b3 no longer playable. So after a3, I think b3 is no longer the thing to do. This pawn is now backwards, but it's inaccessible, so it's probably okay. You could potentially play b3. But now basically white's pawn structure is going to look pretty fractured. I think white's best chance here is to start an attack on the king side, and just hold everything solid over here. I think this is what white does. Yeah, just leave this. Leave this alone. Improve the queen's position to like f1. And then make basically make sure that that you've got attacks on the king side. Knight to e5, I like. Cool, good discovery, and white wins a piece and wins. Okay, cool. Overall, very good. Super closed endgame. I hope white wins. Yeah, okay, so white wins eventually, but. Really sort of an interesting endgame. The knight got trapped on a5. Knight got trapped on a5, and things got pretty tricky for white. But overall, a win for white. In terms of revisiting pieces of this game, Sicilian Alapin is good. C4 is a very restricting move. The engine didn't like G3. I think it's fine. I think G3, Bishop G2 is a fine plan. I don't see any problem with it. Obviously, this bishop's not going to do anything on this diagonal, so Bishop G2 makes sense. I think thematically, maybe playing B3 would have been helpful here, but the bishop was still not going to be on this diagonal. I mean, in order to get this bishop on this this F1 A6 diagonal, you'd have to play like B3 and then trade on C4, and then play like bishop takes C4 or something. It's just not going to happen. So like here, B3, B5, and there's a lot of pressure on the C4 pawn. So yeah, interesting. Now you're back to about even. Castles, knight d2, knight e6, or bishop e6. And I guess I sort of am not a fan of a3. You know, a3 makes this b pawn backwards. It would be good if you could get like b3 in, and then pawn takes b3, and then pawn takes b3. That would make the weak pawn in this chain the c3 pawn, which, you know, I think you might have better. I mean, basically, it's definitely more vulnerable to attack. But your pawn structure is more centralized and not as generally backward as the pawn on b2. So I think a3 sort of limits your b pawn's mobility, and will make your pawn structure fractured if you trade off the b pawn. So for that reason, I guess I would say I would lean even here over to b3 over a3. But yeah, I mean, sort of. There's some truth to that. I would start advancing on the king side. I mean, you might be able to leave this all alone entirely and start playing moves like h4, knight h2, knight g4, something like that. But I think then you're good. Knight e5 is what I would play here. Yeah, so knight e5. But white's got a good position now. This really was the right plan for white, you know, starting an attack on the king side. You know, I think you can just sort of leave the queen side alone. Like, don't even bother with a3. Just start playing like maybe the best way to do it is h3, knight f1, knight h2, knight g4, something like this. So yeah, so I would avoid a3. Hey, thank you very much, thanks very much for the follow, Com. Really appreciate it. Thank you for joining the stream. Yeah, so a3, and I think basically, you know, white's good here. It's about equal, no real problems. And yeah, knight e5 I think is the play. Not bishop h3, just either the engine's saying knight takes f6 is good. I'd play knight e5. Let's just see what the eval on that is. Bad. Great. It still looks like a good outpost to me. F5 is what the engine is suggesting. But this obviously this kingside attack has been very solid for white. So good play there. Good idea. Good shifting to that plan. I might not have even spent as much time as you did on the queen side here. Shifting to the king side attack seems like the best strategic possibility. Here, yeah, knight g4. I like knight e5, but I guess there's a tactical reason to not do that. Knight takes f6, queen takes f6. Rook. I want to play even rook e5, but this is all pretty interesting. Also, just you know, rook takes, queen takes d4. 5 is probably objectively the best. But overall, interesting. In terms of improvements for white, I think it was a pretty solidly played game. This g3 was not liked by the engine. Basically the engine was pushing for the b3 undermining of this queenside structure immediately. g3 makes sense to me. I think you can hold off on b3. And then here, you know, once the game has sort of shifted and black has committed to castling kingside, here I think you can launch a kingside attack that will work well for you. Most of your pieces are faced towards the king side. The queen side's locked up, but not particularly vulnerable. And I think you can just push with your knights and rook and knight pawns, and get this king side to be open and generate a successful attack. That's what I would advocate in this position. There's a few other tactical imperfections here, but then you basically get bailed out with the queen taking the bishop. But I think you had a great idea. I think basically moving things towards the king side once the queen side was solid and pretty much not vulnerable. I think moving towards the king side was a good idea. You got a lot of action on the king side quickly, and then black basically makes an error, and you get to take the bishop on h5. So overall, good game. I guess the two main points that I'd look at are whether or not you wanted to undermine that queenside pawn structure immediately with b3, as opposed to playing the g3 bishop g2 route, and the other one, I guess I would say, when should you start the attack on the king side? And I think it might have been a good idea to start the attack on the king side even earlier, like maybe even as early as move 14. I think that you can officially say that the king side attack started on about move, I don't know. It's definitely started by move 25, and I guess maybe it sort of started. Yeah, I mean it takes a while. I think you could have definitely started the king side attack a few moves earlier. I don't really know if anything was gained by spending this tempo on this queen side. I think if you were ever under pressure there, you could just sort of lock it up. Here, you've played a few moves and it is locked up, which is great. But I think you could have gotten some tempo on the king side first. So overall, very interesting game. Thank you all very much for sending the games to me. I really appreciate it. Please keep sending them. Thank you for being here, and yeah, look forward to seeing you at the stream tonight. Tonight we have a stream at 6:05 p.m. Eastern, and I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you very much for being here. Have a good day, everyone. Bye. Thanks.